Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am Wendy Haddock Brown with Garden of Life Canada, and we would like to thank you very much for joining us today for this presentation in combination with Healthy Planet, probiotics for digestive and immune health. Today, we have Amber Lynn Vital. She is one of our national educators, and she has practiced as a certified nutritionist, Ayurvedic clinical consultant, advanced body worker, and yoga therapist since 1996. Much of her nutrition practice was in collaboration with functional medicine doctors and other integrative practitioners. Since 2008, she has also produced written and video educational content for many publications, as well as for her own clients and an interested public audience. Amber has been a member of the Garden of Life education team since 2014, continuing her mission by powering extraordinary health. If you have questions during Amber's presentation, please feel free to type them into the chat box, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. At this time, I will hand it over to Amber.
Thanks, Wendy. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being here this evening. We're going to jump into very important territory, probiotics. And what is fascinating about probiotics is that they are always good for your digestive and immune health. A probiotic being something that is pro-life, beneficial for your health. If it is going to benefit your digestive system and your digestive tract lining, it is going to benefit your immune system. How much of your immune system is in your gut? Turns out it's like 2/3 of your immune system is in your gut. And those are your human cells, as well as these microbes that live in the human gut. It's pretty astounding, actually. So we understand a lot more now about the human microbiome than we did even 20 years ago. I remember first starting to hear functional medical doctors talking about it in practice in the early 2000s, and going to conferences in integrative medicine and functional nutrition, functional medicine, where they were realizing that if you're just out there saying, oh, you need zinc for this, you need echinacea for that, you need elderberry for this, you need D3 for that, you need bioidentical hormones for this, that you really didn't have the whole picture, and you were only going to be superficially, temporarily benefiting the patient if you hadn't addressed gastrointestinal health and balance. Now, I think for decades, I mean, as long as I've been around, as long as I can remember as a kid even, and that's 5 decades now, probiotics were so important when you had an antibiotic. And that's really what we think about. You're on an antibiotic because you have some kind of an infection. If you have a progressively thinking family or doctor, they said, hey, you should go get a Lactobacillus acidophilus or a Bifidobacterium bifidum probiotic, right? But there weren't a lot of choices years ago. Now that the Human Microbiome Project has been instated through the NIH, now that there's been tons of research globally, researching also people who live in different cultures and live different lifestyles, and people who live where they eat no plants and only eat animals, and people who live where they eat only sea animals, and people who live where all they eat is plants, and people who live where all they do is hunt and gather. In all of these situations, we see slightly different microbiomes or microbiota, but what we see overall is that diversity leads to better health and numbers. So the higher number of different species and strains that are present that are beneficial or at least neutral or supporting each other is really what leads to greater overall health. Also, resistance to pathogens, resistance to disease from pathogens coming in, especially orally and even nasally. Now, I don't know that a healthy gut microbiome is going to help you directly with pathogens that might come in from a wound. However, when the gut is doing what it is supposed to do, when it is defending against everything that comes in through the mouth, creating a healthy immune response from the moment that you are conceived all the way through birth and all the way into adulthood and beyond, If your gut is doing its job, your bloodstream has a lot less work to do and uses up a lot less resources and has a lot more resources available for an infection from a wound, for example, or an infection coming in from breathing a respiratory bacteria or virus, for example. So I always say that our blood-mediated immune system should really just be running perimeter control. It should really just be like a nighttime security guard in a warehouse, and just be able to check the couple entrances and make sure that nothing is getting in. When those entrances are not locked, when there are new holes blown in the walls of the warehouse, that one security guard is not adequate and more resources have to come. So it is the same with your bloodstream mediated immune system. When the gut isn't doing what it is supposed to do, not creating that defense, not creating that wall, not creating that selective filtration of what can get in from the gut lining into the bloodstream and what cannot, then the rest of your immune system suffers. So understanding that there are microbiota in our ear, there is a specific microbiota collection of microorganisms that make it balanced in the ears, in the throat, in the lungs, in the urinary tract, vaginally, around the tissue that surrounds the prostate. We now know that the womb itself isn't exactly sterile, that babies have a microbiome even when they're born by C-section. They don't have to be born vaginally to have some microbiome. It's not as diverse, it's not as robust, but they definitely have one. Your appendix microbiome is different than the small intestine and the large intestine. So really, really important to understand this concept of microbiome, which is this overall collection of trillions of microorganisms. The soil has a microbiome, your dog has a microbiome, right? And then we use the word microbiota when we're talking about a specific area of the body or of certain soil or certain ecosystems, for example. And so what does the human microbiome do for us? This is often the question. How does it help us? Well, as I said, if you have a robust, diverse, abundant microbiome, you are better protected against pathogenic organisms. That could be that your skin has the right microbiome and is protecting, against something coming in that infects a spider bite or a mosquito bite or a cut or a pimple, or anything like that, keeping it from getting badly infected. That your nasal passages and sinus passages have a robust microbiome that helps to defend against any pathogens colonizing there. And then obviously everything that we eat, if we can travel around the world and eat cuisine all over the world and not get sick, we have a robust gastrointestinal microbiome. Urinary tract has its own microbiome. If it's robust, we tend to not be as susceptible to things that are coming in from the outside exogenously, like, swimming in a funky lake and sitting around your swimsuit all day, or things that come from partners, for example. And so being able to defend ourselves against the odd pathogen that might show up. Also, there are so many metabolic functions cellularly that rely upon the microbiome in the gastrointestinal tract and in the lungs especially. And so these organisms will metabolize certain things, they will make certain things. Your actual heart health, it turns out, is very dependent upon attracting organisms that break down your bile and cause your liver to then refresh your cholesterol with fresh, new, unoxidized fats. If that bile doesn't get properly broken down because the organisms aren't there, because you have a poor diet that is not rich in, fibers and polyphenols and healthy plants and things like that, then you tend to accumulate oxidized fat, which means your cholesterol is oxidized, which means it's harmful to the cardiovascular system. Not to mention you tend to make certain compounds that are also toxic that lend to fatty liver disease that lead to other heart and cardiovascular issues as well. So these little functions are so incredibly important. These microorganisms make bioactive peptides. These are amino acid sequences that are smaller than a whole protein. Lipids, like short chain fatty acids. You have fatty acids that you use in your brain that cross the blood-brain barrier that have to be made in the gut. as these organisms consume certain soluble fibers and resistant starches, resistant to human digestion, but digestible by microorganisms. And those are allowed across the gut lining into the bloodstream, across the blood-brain barrier into the brain, and become fuel for neurons, a very clean burning fuel that keeps a steady energy flow for your neurons and doesn't allow breaks in energy that would cause micro damage in the brain and lead to cognitive decline, and in some cases even dementia. So there are roles that are played by microorganisms in the gut that affect even the brain. B vitamins, you can make them all if you have the right microorganisms and the right diet and the right lifestyle as well. Like, you can't be stressed and having toxic thoughts and toxic emotions. It really does affect the organisms that can thrive in your gut. And if that is how you're living your life, you won't attract organisms that can make all these vitamin K2 for you and that can make B vitamins for you. We should be able, when we get pregnant, to make enough folates with the microorganisms in our gut and the food that we eat to promote proper DNA replication, to have a healthy baby born with no birth defects. We should be able to do that. But if we have a diet that is devoid in the nutrients that attract and feed the bifidobacteria that would make those folates, and we don't feed those bifidobacteria the right foods with the right polyphenols, antioxidants, the right types of fibers and starches, then they won't make that folate, and we will be deficient in it, and we will be more prone to replication errors, which lead to birth defects. So it's amazing that we have all the machinery, we have all the equipment, but we have to provide the right fuel for the equipment, and we have to maintain it properly. Something that is so important about the microbiome in the digestive tract is that 2/3 of the immune system part, where microbes actually interact with immune cells in the gut and signal out to the bloodstream, to the white blood cells, to the antibody generation, to the memory cells, to create a robust and healthy, balanced immune response. When we have an inadequate immune response and when we have an excessive immune response, we tend to not have a balanced microbiome in the gastrointestinal tract, and that is what is causing it. So it goes back to the old adage. Some people remember it from being from Hippocrates, but it goes back much further than that, back to Ayurvedic medicine, first records of it, and then maybe even further back in oral history, is that the gastrointestinal tract is the root of all disease and all health. If something goes wrong in the GI, it's going to go wrong elsewhere down the road, but you can always trace it back to that digestive system health. So why is it something that requires supplementation today? Why do we need to take a probiotic supplement? Why do we need to take prebiotic fiber supplements? Why do we need to supplement greens and green juice powders and fruit and vegetable powders? Why do we have to do this? I mean, we're adequate weight, we have adequate energy, we have adequate calories, by and large. So why would that be necessary? Well, most of the planet looked like this not that long ago, and we were not exposed to toxins on a daily basis, barring the occasional volcanic eruption, or just stumbling across some kind of geothermal spring that was spewing out some kind of toxic chemicals. There are stories about springs that are full of toxic compounds, or volcanic events that are spewing out some kind of toxic compound. But other than that, for the most part, we didn't come into contact with these kinds of toxins. Just the daily exposure that the average person living in an urban environment, drinking municipal water, exposed to pollutants in the air, the average exposure to heavy metals that they might have requires so much more vitamin C simply to neutralize that toxicity, that they don't have enough left over to support all of the immune system and tissue production that vitamin C is supposed to provide as well. And so we are deficient. B vitamins, we shouldn't be deficient in B vitamins, and yet we are, because we use them up in detoxification pathway enhancement in order to simply maintain homeostasis. Because for the most part, this, whether we know it or not, is what a lot of us are exposed to, right? And so, I mean, it's so important to know that as early as 1980, glyphosate, which is the main ingredient in Roundup, was sprayed on crops, all kinds of crops, grain crops, legume crops, those are beans, rice, to dry and ripen them quickly, or ripen the whole field evenly so that it could be harvested and go into making cereals and pastas and breads and cookies and all of that, right? So it has been in our food supply here in North America much longer than we've had actually genetically modified foods that are made glyphosate tolerant, like corn and soy and cotton meal and alfalfa, beets, and so on and so forth. So we've been exposed to this for much longer than we were aware. And it is in our food, and it is in our water, it is in our soil, it is in our air. If we live in an urban environment, as I said, we're exposed to all kinds of toxins, respiratory toxins, skin toxins, water toxins. If you don't know where your food comes from or what food your food eats, then you have no idea what you're exposed to. And then there are so many non-food ingredients that we eat on a daily basis in the standard, we'll call it the SNAD, the standard North American diet, that is, not helpful for our health. So we have a lot of needs. There are a lot of things that are disrupting the microbiome. Glyphosate is an antibiotic. That is its first patent. Our water is chlorinated, fluoridated, brominated. That kills microorganisms. We are under stress, so maybe we consume more alcohol. This food does not feed a microbiome. It feeds, pathogens will eat anything, but the ones that you want to make those compounds, those bioactive peptides and signaling compounds for you, they're not going to thrive on this. So I could make a case for cold French fries, though, because then the starch becomes resistant. So it might do a little bit of good. Some cold French fries and a pickle, maybe give you a little bit of benefit, right? And what your food eats, what food your food eats will absolutely affect your health. So we have to know exactly what we're getting into when we put things in our mouths and how that is going to affect us in the long term. I would posit, based on how certain types of vitamins and minerals are developed today that are made in a more fermented and cultured way, that if we just put synthetic chemical vitamins into our gut all the time, it could actually damage some of our microbes that are trying to thrive there. Also, we have no control over how we're born, and 2/3 of people might actually be born by C-section, depending upon where you live exactly. As I said, the chlorination, fluoridation, bromination of the water, refined sugar, all microorganisms can divide and multiply on sugar, but they will not make things for you that are beneficial, not even the good guys. And the pathogens love sugar and refined starches. It makes it very easy for them to proliferate, form a biofilm, make a canopy over themselves, and thrive and survive. Contraceptives, whether it's ones that we are taking that we know about, or ones that are in our water supply that never get filtered out because there's not a method for that or an awareness of that, or certain hormones that might be in your food supply because of the ways that animals are raised on factory farms, antibiotics in these animals, antibiotics like glyphosate in your soil and on your plant food even, and pesticides, meaning herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides that would be on plants or in animals that ate those plants. Now, I don't want to put down a good glass of red wine or white wine or rosé or a natural wine, an orange wine. I mean, these kind of things have been around a long time. Sour beers that are more like the old style beers, the way that they were originally consumed by humans. These are fermented foods, but too much consumption of alcohol will destroy microorganisms. This is why wine only reaches about 14, 15% alcohol level, because at that point it destroys the yeast, they die, and they cannot keep fermenting. So you get higher by distilling. So it is that distilled alcohol above that 15% that is going to be especially damaging to the microorganisms that are trying to thrive in your mouth, in your throat, in the stomach, and whatever makes it all the way down into the intestinal tract for people who drink distilled alcohol on an empty stomach, which is when it's really, really bad for you. Moderate alcohol consumption as a part of a healthy diet can be beneficial for a lot of people, help digestion. There's a lot of conditions that call for a little bit of that, but excessive consumption without a healthy diet, not so good. If you do not ferment food at home, if you're only buying a store-bought yogurt, even if it's organic, that may not be enough cultured food to keep those organisms replenished in your body and your gut. And if you do not eat out of a garden, out of healthy soil, you may never encounter certain organisms that humans have lived with throughout human history. There are certain things that are in healthy soil that grow healthy plants that we eat when we eat those healthy plants. If you aren't eating out of a garden, out of a farmer's market where there's still some dirt in the cracks on the carrots and the potatoes and the beets, then you never get those organisms. And we're starting to see that there are huge health benefits to having those in your diet as opposed to those who do not have them. But even if you did everything right, even if you lived a healthy lifestyle, exercised and everything, even if you ate perfectly for your constitution, even if you took all the right supplements on a very good regimen, if you are stressed, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, you are outputting cortisol, you are causing disruption of your endocannabinoid system, you will get a leaky gut, a damaged gut lining, you will let things into the bloodstream that don't belong there, and you will have an unhealthy digestive and immune system response. So we do have to look at how we are living our lives and how we are affecting our stress response as well. So if we were living a true human natural life, whether you called yourself a hunter or gatherer, or whether you called yourself a farmer, agrarian, a nomad, a herder, you would be exposed to so many natural microorganisms. Your microbiome would look a lot like the animals that you tend or the dirt that you tend. If you have pets that get out into a healthy outdoor environment, that actually can be very beneficial to your microbiome as well. If you have pets that live in an urban environment with you and only go to the dog park, not so much, right? So we have to really look at our lifestyle and see where we need to supplement as a hack into a more natural way of living. Before we had refrigerators and ice boxes, we only had fermenting. Anything you milked, to keep that milk, it needed to be turned into a cheese or a fermented product. If you wanted to store vegetables long term, they either had to be dried or fermented. Meat was actually dried or fermented. There's tons of examples of that. So even our breads came after beer and came out of this soaking, sprouting, fermenting of grains that ultimately led to then the making of bread, which originally was not just ground into this fine flour like we see today. So dysbiosis is a term that refers to an unhealthy, imbalanced microbiome in the gut, or it could be anywhere in the nasal passages after too many antibiotics for sinus infections, on the skin, using too much soap and too many harsh compounds on the skin. This dysbiotic state is common for most people in industrialized populations, modern populations. So where would we have gotten our probiotics naturally before we ever thought about supplementing? So as I said, hands in the dirt. You're a farmer, you're a gardener, you buy food from these people and eat it. You have a healthy outdoor environment in which to play. You like to get out and hike in nature and dig in the dirt and look for mushrooms, turn over rocks, collect things. You'll have a good exposure. You got a little dirt under your nails from a healthy outdoor environment. That can be a good thing. Fermented foods, even fermented dairy, has been shown to really extend the life of humans when it is a daily consumption and not something that you're buying in a store that is commercially made and probably pasteurized and probably doesn't have as high of a live cell count as something you would make at home. And then the way that we're born is our first inoculation into the information from the mother's birth canal. There are definitely situations where we don't want the information in the mother's birth canal, and I think that in the future, we'll be able to really deduce what would be the best scenario for this baby. If mom's birth canal isn't healthy yet, maybe a better scenario is to be born by C-section and then to inoculate accordingly. And that's done in cases of sexually transmitted diseases, but not really looked at in case of the microbiome. So it's very important for moms who want to be pregnant and are pregnant to get a healthy urogenital microbiome before giving birth to the baby so that they get the best start and the best information as they pass through the birth canal. So let's talk about what these living microorganisms in and on us would want to eat. So most of what they want to eat is going to come from plants, not animals. Okay, so you are an animal, I am an animal. We take plant food and we can turn it into certain animal parts, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we can't consume an animal. We are animals that can consume other animals. But if we are not an animal that consumes all of another animal, including what that animal ate in the intestinal tract and in the organs, then we definitely need to consume plants. So I hope you understand that if you are a full carnivore, you had better be eating the intestinal tract of your animal as well, and the organs. And, there's some philosophy there, but if you look at true civilizations that live on a really no plant, no fiber diet, they are eating the entire animal. And that would be like the Greenland Eskimos, the very far North American native populations, the people of northern Siberia who herd and eat and milk reindeer. They're not eating plants the way that we think about it in our gardens. They're getting these plant compounds from eating the whole animal that they hunt or fish for. So plants contain a mixture of fibers that we need to feed a healthy microbiome. Insoluble fiber, really nothing breaks that down. We don't have, as humans, cellulose metabolizing microbes to very much of any extent. Now, cows do. My sheep and goats do. They can eat things that we cannot get a nutritional benefit from, right? Cows have 4 stomachs. It goes through, more or less, it goes through these multiple pathways. It goes in one, comes back up. They chew things multiple times. They chew their cud. I can watch my sheep all day just chewing contentedly. It's very, very interesting. We don't do that. Okay. It's not something that we do. We are monogastric, and we need to have fibers that we can actually utilize, carbohydrates that we can actually utilize. Fibers, we don't actually utilize. Our organisms do or don't. We don't have organisms to utilize insoluble fiber. So it is that fiber that you see on the other end, but it's a good scrubby, like a Brillo pad, to kind of move things along and keep things clean in the lining of the gut. But soluble fiber is the one that creates fullness, satiation. It helps to balance your blood sugar because it promotes slower emptying. So when you have something that's sweet, but it comes with a lot of soluble fiber, like a plantain, then you have a combination of, good palatability and mouthfeel, carbohydrates that we can actually use for calories and energy, and fibers that the microbiome is actually going to utilize and signal for satiation and for blood sugar balance, and a whole bunch of other things like those short chain fatty acids I talked about that you need in your brain. So we've talked about oats. I'm sure you've heard about oats being heart healthy, right? Because oats have soluble fiber. And if you eat your oats or your oat cereal, like Cheerios, you can have soluble fiber and it will just give you a healthy cholesterol level. It's not quite that simple, but remember I spoke about microorganisms that metabolize bile. Well, those microorganisms are attracted to a diet rich in this stuff. And if you have a diet rich in this stuff, those microorganisms can then thrive and stay, and they will eat up your bile and mop up those fatty acids that are oxidized and damaging, and therefore allow your liver to produce new fresh ones that are not damaging and not inflammatory. So there is a interrelationship here. And so another thing is what is called resistant starches. And I don't think I have that here. Oh, I do. So we'll get there in a moment. So we'll get to resistant starch as well. But really, soluble fiber, insoluble fiber, both are indigestible by you, but utilizable by your microbiome when it comes to soluble fiber, and utilizable by a ruminant's microbiome when it comes to insoluble fiber. Thus, the food that you are eating, if it is an animal, they ate food that their microbiome was able to digest for them. So the average human, according to the RDI, the recommended dietary intake by probably Health Canada in your case, and the Council for Responsible Nutrition, the FDA in the US, we say we need 25 grams of fiber alone a day, and the average person is getting much less than that. The Hadza, this refers to a story I used to talk a lot about, but it is a study by the Human Food Project looking at hunter-gatherers in Tanzania who still live that lifestyle. They're out in the bush, they're hunting, they are gathering tubers, they have greens at certain times of the year, berries and fruits at certain times of the year. And they did studies on their microbiome and their overall health and compared it to mostly a British microbiome, which was who was conducting the study. So it was very, very fascinating. They found that the average adult in the Hadza community consumed 150 grams of fiber and resistant starch a day. That's a lot. That's a lot more than we can imagine. It would take a lot of supplementation for me to reach that amount. And so sources of prebiotic fiber, like soluble fiber and some resistant starches, we're going to see in these types of foods. And most of us don't consume these things raw. Acacia gum is something that grows on acacia trees in multiple places in the world, but ours comes from sub-Saharan Africa. It's actually a part of a project called the Acacia Project, which has been around, I think, since the 50s to encourage people to replant acacia trees because they hold in water in the root system, they provide shade, they provide a canopy for animals and bees and butterflies and birds, and they provide this resin. And it is a part of Unani medicine, which informed Ayurvedic medicine many centuries later, for stomach distress, intestinal distress. You would use this acacia gum. You could chew on this resin. It would actually be satiating on long journeys as well. Chicory root may be something more of you are familiar with, Jerusalem artichoke, and then of course dandelion greens, garlic, leeks, onions. As we cook them, they don't have as much prebiotics. So if you're a raw onion, raw garlic consumer, you can start to see how these foods might be touted as beneficial for the immune system because of the way they're actually interacting with your digestive system and your microbiome. When we go to low gluten or no gluten diet, a lot of people lost a lot of their fiber consumption because your corn starches and corn cereals and tapiocas and rices, they may not have had quite as much of the prebiotics as you were used to getting. And then you get into things like bananas and plantains and so on and so forth, which also provide something called resistant starch, resistant to human digestion, meaning that it is a carbohydrate that is available for your microbiome to utilize. And this, you have to know where to find it. It's not going to be on your label. You have to know that it's in there. So most of us don't consume raw potatoes. There's kind of a reason for that, but potato starch is made from raw potatoes. And so you might be using potato starch in cooking. There are people who supplement with it to supplement their microbiome. Plantain flour, tapioca starch, tapioca flour, cassava, manioc. These are all really the same thing, but in different places. Oddly enough, if you baked or boiled potatoes, then cooled it and diced it up and made a cold potato salad, you're actually going to consume more starch for your microbiome and less calories for you, except for the mayonnaise that you put on the salad, right? So those that eat rice that was made the day before actually get more resistant starch. When I was in Ecuador, we would bake plantains and then take them on the road with us and gnaw on them. I had the best digestive health when I was in Ecuador from eating all these plantains and all of their variations. Couldn't believe how much my health improved. And I was probably consuming a few new microorganisms as well. So you kind of have to know where to find these things, but it's very inexpensive to supplement if you decide to throw them into your juice, your green drink, your smoothie, your coffee, and just have them be a part of your daily prebiotic consumption. So knowing all of that, as we started to work with Dr. David Perlmutter and we addressed all of this new information about the human microbiome, about the digestive system and the immune system, about how they're interrelated. If you don't have digestive health, you don't have immune health. We started to work on developing a whole line of probiotics and prebiotics and enzymes that would support the digestive system and therefore the immune system's health as well. So this whole line has only clinically researched and relevant beneficial strains. Nothing is random, nothing is general. They are all strain identified. That means that they were kept in a cryo chamber. They're genetically sequenced, genome sequenced. They have a particular identifier, and that particular genome sequenced organism goes into research, human research, and the studies are statistically significant enough to warrant utilizing them in a product and making a claim on that product, as you'll start to see as we go through them. Every one of these probiotics is in a capsule. The capsule is irrelevant to the efficacy of the product. None of the strains that we use has ever been enteric coated or put in any kind of a sustained release capsule. They were all given in a powder, in a capsule, in a drink, in a food, and were shown to have benefits administered in that way and have survivability through the gastrointestinal tract. Every one of the capsules also has prebiotic resistant starch and prebiotic soluble fiber as a brown bag lunch for those organisms as they pass through the digestive tract and start to find the place that they're going to set up shop. And then digestive enzymes we'll talk as we get toward the end of the presentation. So we use an organic potato starch resistant to digestion by you, but being utilized by your microorganisms. And again, it is only enough for the organisms in the capsule. This is not a spoonful of resistant starch. It's not a spoonful of potato starch. It is only for the microorganisms in the capsule that have been shown to proliferate and produce beneficial things for you, like butyric acid, if they are present when the microorganism is ready to eat. And then acacia fiber, fiber gum is the brand name or trademark name of this acacia fiber, a form of acacia fiber that is very high quality and has really no taste and no color, and ferments all the way through the small and large intestine because it is available for 1 to 2 days, 24 to 48 hours, available for fermentation. So it can help the growth of all lacto-organisms in the small intestine, bifido-organisms in the large intestine, and is much longer fermenting than what are called fructo-oligosaccharides, which was a very common prebiotic in cheaper probiotics that are available on the shelf. It's not that it's bad, it's just that it doesn't have as long of a fermentation as acacia fiber does. And acacia fiber is very tolerable, even by people. You can go on forums for IBS and so on and so forth and see how gentle acacia gum is considered to be. So let's jump into the products. We started this line with a 9-to-5 blend, 9 lactobacillus species strains, 5 bifidobacterium species strains, balanced for colonization, epithelial lining colonization, support of the urogenital system, vaginally and the prostate, urinary tract, support of the colon health, because the colon health informs vaginal, urinary tract, and prostate health, things that have effects outside the body, things that balance the motility of the gastrointestinal tract, the digestion of foods, the utilization of them in the body, and all in all, everything balancing out to be beneficial. And that 9-to-5 blend is the basis of this first product, this once daily 30 billion. There are some superstar strains in here. Lactobacillus acidophilus 14, very well known to make it all the way through your digestive tract and colonize vaginally if you are have the right environment and pH to keep it there vaginally. It will keep the right acidity. Plantarum 115, very important for informing that blood-mediated white blood cell immune response. Lactobacillus gasseri, very good in allergies, asthma, chronic rhinitis, also weight, attaining and maintaining a healthy body weight. Paracasei 37, lots of stuff on immune system, on colonization, and also now on gut-brain axis. We have some good studies on that as well. Things that we see in cultured foods that have always shown a benefit for the digestive and immune health. Something like BL818 that we use a lot of now because it seems to be like, I consider BL818 as your roadies for your main attraction. So they are the crew that come in the other bus that set everything up and break everything down. They put up all the sound, they put up all the, design, they do the stage design, the set design, they do all the lights, they do all the videography, they do all the costuming, the makeup. They make the show happen, but nobody ever knows who they are. And that's what I think of as BL818. It is the stage setter for all of the rest of the superstars to function optimally. So this is a very balanced blend at a lower CFU count for people who either are sensitive to a higher CFU count or who have an otherwise pretty healthy diet and lifestyle, but don't get out in the dirt and don't eat or ferment food at home that they are making themselves. The once daily ultra 90 billion live cell count, CFU means live cell count. We guarantee that at expiration, 2-year shelf life. We know that it will be there viable at expiration. This is a bit more potent. It has some more potent strains and it has a more potent live cell count. We have used any of these, all of these in our household to culture yogurt. So we get raw goat milk from the neighbor. I just picked some up today. And when we have too much, we just throw in a couple of probiotics and put it in a crock and ferment it. And it can become so fermented, it can actually turn almost into a cheese. I've seen that happen before. It depends on how much we use and when we catch it and the nature of the milk that particular week. So these are alive, they are viable, and their aliveness and viability is guaranteed at the expiration date. This is known to support colon health, but also strongly support immune system health through the Lactobacillus plantarum 115, HN001, Paracasei 37, NCFM acidophilus, and then your stage setter down here, BL818. This is awesome when you're a little under the weather, when something's affecting your gastrointestinal tract, when you've been on an antibiotic or are on an antibiotic and want to allay some of those effects of whatever illness you have, like a sinus infection or something, or the side effects of the antibiotic, which for some people are unavoidable. So this is a much more potent product based on this Lactobacillus acidophilus, which we all know, but certain strains like the NCFM acidophilus is the most researched acidophilus strain in the world. And just to explain the difference between a species, acidophilus, and a strain identified with a number or a name or both, we are all Homo sapiens, and yet we might all be different strains of Homo sapiens. So that could be called race, ethnicity, genetic heritage. Those are different strains. All dogs that you keep in your house are Canis domesticus, and yet there are different breeds of dogs. Those would be different strains of dogs. And a mutt is going to be a strain all in and of itself. And that might not be very easily duplicable, right? Because it might just be such a mishmash. A lot of us humans are mutts and we're such a mishmash, you couldn't actually just duplicate it in a petri dish, right? So the difference between species and strain is like Homo sapiens or Canis domesticus versus a breed or a race or an ethnicity or a genetic heritage. That makes sense. So this product is really a heavy hitter. Per capsule, it's about as much CFU as the 90 billion. This is about 100 billion at expiration. But this product is designed to encourage you to take 2 capsules a day together or separate, very high potent with specific strains that help to rebuild a healthy flora after decimating it. So after an illness, after doing the stuff that cleans you out for a colonoscopy, after antibiotic therapy or even IV antibiotic therapy. So anything that steroid use that might, obliterate your diversity of your microbiome and you want to restore it. I definitely recommend taking this as you are taking your antibiotic, but try to separate your antibiotic and your probiotic by at least 2 hours. If you have to take one before the other, most antibiotics are going into the bloodstream. So if you've taken that first and it's had time to get in your bloodstream, it's not going to affect the probiotic very much. But typically I would say take the antibiotic first and follow with the probiotic later. The same is true with alcohol. Drink the vodka first, then follow it with the probiotic. Don't follow your probiotic with your vodka. Okay, just a little hacking tip right there. So as you can see, there's a very high amount of this para-KCI37 for colonization on the epithelial lining, the cells of the intestinal tract, for the informing the immune system. Hey, we've got something we need to tend to here, but let's not go crazy. Helping you maintain a good gut-brain axis would be incredible with this. If you're under stress and you got sick and you went on an antibiotic, this is an organism you absolutely want, and we're using a lot of it in here. So plantarum for immune system health 14. This will also help to keep the vaginal microbiome healthy in women that are prone to yeast infections while on an antibiotic. So this is really designed for 2 weeks during an antibiotic, and I would get another bottle when you finish your antibiotic and do it for another 2 weeks to restore that microbiome. We also are able to introduce a soil-based organism in this product for the first time in Canada. We have a lot in the US, but this is the first time we've brought it to Canada. And I love it that you have this finally in a product, because if you don't have your hands in healthy dirt or garden or eat food from healthy dirt from your farmer, from your farmer's market, where you see that there is dirt on it, this is what humans did all the way back, all the way back. So we need these things. They definitely help the digestive system. They help the immune system. They help your blood markers like cholesterol levels, blood sugar levels. It's amazing how many things can be affected by these bacillus organisms, and have them in the clinically researched form in this probiotic. So when you take 2 of these capsules, you're getting 5 billion, which is the standard clinically researched amount of Bacillus subtilis. So definitely a great way to keep pathogens at bay and to recolonize and inoculate the gastrointestinal tract. Once Daily Women's Probiotic is our best seller overall at Garden of Life. Not, among proteins, among greens, probiotics, we sell more of this product than anything else. And there is a reason for that. You have Lactobacillus acidophilus 14, you have Rhamnosus and Reuteri species, which are all known to help colonize the vagina specifically, and create healthy floral balance, which is going to therefore affect the urinary tract especially. So this is something that keeps women on track, whether it's you're prone to yeast infections, urinary tract infections, or bacterial vaginosis. That also is just very good for overall female health. And this is why it is such a big seller, because it keeps things on track, even when you don't know they're about to go off track. So in our women's products or women's focused products, we always have Rhamnosus and Reuteri, because they are shown to work together so well in maintaining that floral balance, organisms that will stay in the vagina and produce acids that keep the right pH. That's what's so important. And for men, the goal is to keep them healthy, even when they don't know they're being kept healthy. So we want something that really is focused on overall immune system health and gives some support to the colon. That is just, if I take this every day, I stay healthy. If I get sick, I recover very quickly. This is what we want for men. And some of the strains in here, like Lactobacillus fermentum, are studied in male endurance athletes. Not that every man is an endurance athlete, but that is a way to replicate stress on the body and how the body can defend itself against the ill effects of stress and recover from them. So if you only want one probiotic, a woman can take this and a man can take the women's. That's not an issue. It's not going to cause hormonal changes or secondary sexual characteristic changes. Women aren't going to grow a beard and men aren't going to grow breasts. So don't freak out about that. But these are designed with the concerns of men and women in mind. Urinary Tract Plus is going to be used more by women, but it is for anybody prone to urinary tract infections who gets them recurrently multiple times every year. Definitely people are going to use this acutely, like when they are in the middle of a urinary tract infection, but it's really about prevention. The organisms, the probiotic organisms in 2 capsules. So this describes 1, but the amount that you're supposed to take is 2. These organisms are helping to maintain a healthy environment so that you can fight off infectious organisms, pathogenic organisms, right? If you have recurring urinary tract issues, you have a colon problem. So even if you're coming in and saying, I think it's this, I think it's that, it is always your digestive tract that is contributing to the problem of your recurrent urinary tract infection, barring, that you're a swimmer and you swim in a river every day, and then you have to sit around in your swimsuit on the bus ride home every single day, and that you get a urinary tract infection because of that, something like that. For the most part, it's coming from an unhealthy rectum, the lower part of the colon of the digestive tract. So we have to address that. But there is additional ingredient in here from cranberry that has been reconfigured to optimize this anti-adhesion activity against specifically the little legs on E. coli bacteria. So if you are prone to E. coli specifically in urinary tract infections, this is definitely the product for you. What is better about Pac Cran versus cranberry juice or cranberry extract is that the anti-adhesion activity is as high, but it lasts more than twice as long. It lasts more than 24 hours. So if you take your 2 capsules in the morning and you don't take them again until the next morning, you're getting consistent coverage of flushing out these bacteria while your immune system takes hold of the infection and rebuilds your defenses. So the studies were done in Petri dish, in vitro, in vivo, and what we saw was the anti-adhesion activity and reduction of E. coli. But what I love is that we saw that for more than 24 hours, this anti-adhesion activity remained strong. It didn't plummet after 9 or 10 hours like with juice and extracts, where you have to keep taking them repeatedly and you have to remember that, which is why so many people go to an antibiotic, because they can't remember to take their extract as frequently as they need to for it to be effective. The Prostate Plus probiotic also uses a cranberry concentrate called Flow-Ins, totally different patent. The reconfiguring of the cranberry was in an anti-inflammatory direction, that because it gets into the bloodstream and gets into the kidneys and the ureters, has an effect on prostate health as it moves past the prostate, and can reduce the size of the prostate and improve urine flow. So again, if you have a prostate problem, and this is really a men's product, you have a colon problem and you've had a colon problem for years. So this is something that is so important to know. You think prostate, you think I need saw palmetto, I need pygeum, I need ginseng, I need this, I need that. Yes, but you need to address your colon or you will never have a healthy prostate. And so it's not just eating red meat causes prostate issues, right? It's because you don't have a diet rich in plants that invite a healthy microbiome that puts out the right compounds and converts your hormones properly. And therefore you cause a problem to the prostate. So this is taking care of that colon problem. D3, there are receptors for D3 on the prostate, very important. And then this Flow-Ins was studied in exactly the same manner, using the exact same scoring system for prostate health that was used for a pharmaceutical drug for swollen prostate called Flomax. So the study was conducted the same way, using the same scoring system. They looked at reportable symptoms, but also measurable symptoms. So some of these improvements are quantitative, like how much urine does your bladder hold? How much is left after you urinate? What is the flow rate? What is the total volume of urination? And all of this contributes to a picture of how well urine is flowing through the ureters and the urethra past the prostate. If it is not flowing well, the prostate is inflamed. If it starts to flow better, the prostate is less inflamed. And that's basically the way it's measured. So on 2 capsules, you're getting the amount of Flow-Ins, which is 500 milligrams, that over 3 and then 6 months caused more improvement, twice as much improvement as was yielded in the studies on the prescription drug without the side effects. So this is a long-term daily probiotic for men who have prostate issues that lead to urine flow issues. Mood probiotic is addressing the gut-brain axis, the interrelationship between the gut and the brain, the superhighway along the vagus nerve. Once your gut is distressed, it's sending information back to the brain, and 90% of that roadway is taken up by fibers that run gut to brain. Only 10% is taken up by fibers that run brain to gut. So once you've got a gut problem, you are really causing problems with your neurology. And this we've seen more and more over the last years. So the two main organisms here that were studied in mental health are Lactobacillus helveticus and Bifidobacterium longum. We also have 300 milligrams of ashwagandha and a bit of blueberry, wild blueberry polyphenols that are supportive. Very important in here are Rhamnosus HN001, LP115. And in this particular product, there is some paracasein 37, but not enough to make the brain health claim. The brain health claim and mental health claim is coming from these two organisms. They were studied in two different studies in French laboratories by French researchers, double-blinded, placebo-controlled, and randomized. We know that your gut produces serotonin, your gut produces oxytocin, your gut produces neurotransmitters that signal for things that your brain needs to do. We talked a little bit about this. It's so important. If we can reduce the excessive cortisol output that isn't being utilized by action, right? Like running away from something, then we have room for positive compounds to be produced. So this study was performed in people who were prone to anxiety and depressive symptoms as a result of stress. And they were self-reported about in a particular mental health scoring system, but also physical symptoms like dry mouth, difficulty swallowing, nausea, vomiting, gas, bloating, constipation. And then there was something quantifiable, which was urinary free cortisol. Cortisol that never got broken down, that's running around in your bloodstream until you excrete it in the urine. Well, we want cortisol to be broken down. Who does that? It turns out certain microorganisms like these two will break down that cortisol. Urinary free cortisol reduced by 13.5%. Just by giving the study group these two organisms alone, not by any other measure. No meditation, no soft music, no herbs, no nothing else, just those two organisms. However, we include 300 milligrams of organic ashwagandha in this because of the research and the whole herbal history of ashwagandha for stress support, its adaptogenic support, how it can interact with so many different receptors in the body to help support a healthy stress response. We also add a little bit of blueberry. It's not a lot, but blueberries are very protective of cognitive functioning. Something you may not know about blueberries or any antioxidant that is polyphenol rich, brightly colored, so this applies to the cranberries as well. When you have these in your diet, your D3 receptors work much better, whether you're making D3 in the sunshine or whether you are getting D3 from a supplement. If your receptors are rusty because of lack of polyphenol consumption and excessive inflammation, they don't work. And no matter how much you consume or how much you make out in the sun, you actually aren't receiving it and it's not benefiting you and you're not raising your levels and experiencing that. Also, a lot of people who under stress tend to go on and off anti-anxiety medication. That can be very difficult for the neurons. And so blueberry can be very protective for that. A prenatal probiotic, this is the one to recommend to your friends and family when they are pregnant and have not been on a probiotic before. If they've been on a probiotic before and are on one regularly, they can stay on that one. If they are not on one and they find that they are pregnant, they need to use one that has been clinically researched in pregnant women. This amount, 20 billion a day, is the clinically researched amount. We've never done a study higher than 20 billion in pregnant women. And then there are organisms here that support this healthy immune response, this informing of baby's immune system by normalizing mom's immune system. It's pretty phenomenal. The studies on HN001 were done in women at the last 5 weeks of gestation. So 35 weeks. So they might have had 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks left. And they studied the babies. The babies could have been born naturally or by C-section, but mom had to breastfeed for 6 months and continue taking HN001 for those 6 months. In the group of babies, where the mom had HN001, there was half the incidence of eczema at 2 years old, as in the placebo group, and at 4 years old, that protection was still present. So eczema is a very good indicator of immune system balance. There are lots of other studies on Rhamnosus species and on this particular strain as well. So this is a great one to recommend and to take yourself if you are pregnant. And then the kids is just, again, that good balance, that 9-to-5 blend for kids, rich in lactobacillus gasseri for immune system support. Kids get a lot of allergies, snotty nose, chronic rhinitis. We're really hoping to support them there. I love this because it's a delicious chewable tablet, and kids can suck on it or chew on it. They do not need to brush their teeth afterwards. It's rich in prebiotics, rich in amla berry, providing vitamin C, rich in D3, rich in cranberry for dental health. So all of this makes it an awesome thing to chew on the way out the door to school, on the way to bed. Even after they've brushed their teeth, they can literally take it to bed with them, chew on it. And it just has an age limit for kids, you know, as because it's a choking hazard if they're under 4, we figure. So I also love this product for elderly people who might be self-administering a supplement, because it's not going to do them harm. They'll probably take it because it tastes good. If they forget whether they've taken one and take another one, it's not going to harm them. It's a lower CFU count. So it's a good way to get someone you care about who's elderly and isn't going to swallow a capsule or mess with a powder to take their good probiotic. The enzyme Digest is made the same way. It's a delicious chewable tablet. There's a food blend of 29 different enzyme-rich food powders, in addition to these enzymes that are made in a non-GMO project verified manner, meaning that organisms were given a medium of food to grow on that was not genetically modified corn, soy, beets, you know, and they then produce these enzymes that are then non-GMO project verified, which is astounding. These are chewables. We have these on hand all the time. They're very easy to take, and they are surprisingly potent for being a chewable enzyme. So I really encourage you to try them, because if you cannot digest your food, you cannot absorb it. If you cannot absorb it, you cannot utilize it and benefit from it. And what you cannot digest becomes toxic to you, and your body then has to eliminate it. So digestion is, we should move this to the front of the line, I think, because digestion is really the most important thing. So prebiotics and probiotics plus digestion support. Your probiotics also make enzymes that help you digest, absorb, and assimilate your food and your nutrients. So all in all of this is supporting digestive and thus supporting immune system health. So I want to thank you all for being here. I know I've run to the end of our time, but I will hang on if we have questions.
Thank you so much, Amber. For those of you who may need to leave us and cannot stay for the Q&A, please do not hesitate to reach out to me at webinar@gardenoflifecanada.com if you have additional questions. So many of the questions that came up in the chat boxes you actually covered, but just a few things that I was able to isolate here. Would you be able to go over just what Garden of Life does to ensure the cleanliness and quality of their probiotics, our certifications, as well as speak to wheat and gluten and whether or not there's concerns about those in the products?
Very good question. So it is required for us in the US that whatever growth medium any organism is grown on must be disclosed, in the sense that you cannot call something soy-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, if wheat-free, if the growth medium might have had those things in it. So that didn't used to be the case, but it is definitely the case now. So the probiotics that we have that say gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, that means that the food that those probiotics are growing on is free of gluten, dairy, and soy. The exception in this lineup is the mood probiotic. Those two organisms that make the label claim for mood are grown in a French laboratory. They cannot guarantee no dairy or soy in that medium. There is still no gluten. So the whole line is gluten-free. So it will be either NSF certified gluten-free or GFCO gluten-free, which means below 20 or 10 parts per million, which is pretty much the same thing. Cleanliness, we are subject to all the good manufacturing practice standards of any facility that is going to produce food or supplements and things that need to be stable on the shelf. We also utilize an organization called NSF to verify what is in the bottle and verify the cleanliness of it. Everything has been tested, of course, for microbial content, moisture, having microbes that aren't supposed to be there. And then obviously we do our testing to make sure that the organisms that are supposed to be in there are alive at expiration in the amount that we say is there. So a lot of testing. We are a almost entirely gluten-free company. We are not entirely dairy-free, but most everything is dairy-free. If it shouldn't have dairy in it, it doesn't. If it's like whey, obviously there's going to be dairy in there. I think that answers the question, Wendy. If that's not clear, please reach back out.
Thank you. A few more questions just about when is best to take a probiotic, if consuming it with, say, something like hot tea is a concern, and is there value in changing up formulas?
That is such a common question. I should be addressing it as I go. I always say, take your probiotic when you will remember. So if you will only remember if it is next to your coffee, if you will only remember if it's next to your toothbrush, if you will only remember if it is in your purse or on your desk, then take it then, make sure you get it in. These organisms that are studied have been studied in situations where they've been taken on an empty stomach, where they've been taken in a food, where they've been taken with no instructions whatsoever, where they've been taken with antibiotics at the same time, So they are very hardy. They are known to pass through the gut. I can't really make a case for taking with or without food. I do love if you're only taking one one product, 2 capsules of urinary tract plus, 2 capsules of prostate, 2 capsules of mood, 2 capsules of restore. But if you're only taking that one product, I love it at night, because then you are resting, you're repairing, you're detoxing, you're not eating, you're not stressing. Hopefully you're sleeping. And so I think just has a much better chance to work, and you have a much better likelihood of waking up more balanced and have a good, healthy bowel movement. That's always good. Taking it with hot beverages, yes, to some extent, if you were to swallow these capsules with really hot tea, you would damage some of the organisms, not all of them, but some of them. We definitely destroy some organisms when we drink hot beverages, but we put them back with other foods and beverages that we consume. Nothing we consume is free of microbes. Everything we eat, it may not have food poisoning in it, but it has microbes. It's just unavoidable. We are constantly re-inoculating ourselves, but hot beverages, and alcohols, like I said, distilled alcohols do destroy some measure of microorganisms. So it's not the best way to take it. I would recommend room temperature beverage. Take it with your smoothie. I will drink things down with my coffee, but after it's cooled a little bit, that's pretty common for me because that's when I'll remember it.
A few more questions here, just about when to take. If someone was using one of the products as, for instance, Restore after after a break in the system, an upset to the system, when would you take a probiotic in relationship to an antibiotic?
So definitely a couple hours separate. So if you have to take your antibiotic with food and you need to take it with breakfast, then take your probiotic a couple hours later, right? If you wake up at 6 and you don't eat until 8, when you wake up, you could take your probiotic in an empty stomach and take your antibiotic with your food, for example. You can take your last antibiotic with your dinner, and 2 hours later when you go to bed, you could take your probiotic. So these are ways to separate them. That said, there are plenty of studies on co-therapy of antibiotics with probiotics in which they never told people how to take it, and the likelihood that some of them took them at the same time was high, and yet these organisms still manage to survive because the probiotics want to stay in the gut. Most of us are taking antibiotics for things that are peripheral to the gut, so it tends to dissolve quickly, get into the bloodstream and circulate and not stay in the gut. There are antibiotics that are meant to stay in the gut. If you're taking an antibiotic for your gut, it's going to stay in your gut. That's really going to decimate your probiotics. So that kind of an antibiotic really, really, really needs to be taken at least 2 hours separate separate from probiotics.
Is there a period once you start taking a probiotic where you may experience adjustments in your lower digestive tract, maybe shifts in your bowel movements?
Definitely. And let me also answer the other part to the other question, which is, should you mix it up sometimes? Yes, because diversity is key, and changing up which product you're using, unless you have a specific problem. If you constantly have recurrent urinary tract infections, stay on that until you've balanced out, right? If you're pregnant, stay on that until you're done, right? So if you're nursing, stay on the prenatal until you're done nursing. So other than that, yeah, hey, mix it up a little bit, because you get different organisms, different benefits, different diversity. But as you change, you, depending upon the sensitivity of your system, you may experience some differences. Having a higher CFU count can typically lead to you go to the bathroom more often, because you grow more organisms, and simply that bulk will make you go to the bathroom, let alone the signaling of those microorganisms. Some people don't feel that great when they start a probiotic. It can initiate detoxification pathways as you kill off bad bacteria and dump their contents into your body, and that can be uncomfortable. So slow down, skip a day if you have to, drink plenty of water to flush out any residual toxins that you may be accumulating as a result of these bad bacteria and yeast dying off. You can definitely have die-off reactions. If you consistently feel worse taking a probiotic than not, there may be other things going on, and you really want to seek the help of a integrative practitioner who can try to track that down. Sometimes even good microbes in the wrong place can cause distress.
I'm going to combine two questions into one here. Should an individual consider taking a probiotic every day, or is it beneficial to take breaks? And how long does it take for a probiotic to populate in our gut?
So I always ask myself, what would my ancestors do? And my ancestors literally ate dirt every day. And they ate slightly spoiled, or if I look at agrarian ancestors, fermented food every single day. So if you don't eat dirt and fermented food or slightly spoiled food every single day, then you need a probiotic every day. You may not need 100 billion every day, but you need something. And if we look at cultures that consume fermented food every single day, like Korea or Japan or Eastern Europe, 50 billion live cell count is not difficult to attain, because those foods are super fermented. So that level of supplementation isn't unusual. It's okay to take a break here and there and supply food for your microbiome, like in the form of prebiotic fibers and resistant starches, and kind of coast. I definitely like the idea of getting to where through fermented foods and prebiotics, you're actually naturally maintaining a healthy, diverse microbiome. How quickly do they proliferate? It depends on what you feed them. Absolutely depends on what you feed them. So if you eat at Tim Hortons, go for the Canadian thing, or McDonald's, or, you don't eat a lot of vegetables or plants, you will not grow these organisms. You'll just be putting them in every day, and they won't hang out. You'll just repopulate every day. A lot of these organisms, even with eating supportive foods, they just don't hang around. Those that want to colonize vaginally, if your pH is off, they won't hang around. If you're postmenopausal and have thinning vaginal lining, they might not hang around. And so we have to put them back every single day. So our exposure would have been consistent. There are certain organisms that are better colonizers, like the rhamnosus, the plantarums. They do tend to colonize better and hang out longer. But if you discontinue consumption, they tend to disappear after a couple of weeks. And so this is why a tube-fed diet or a IV line is not the same as eating food. This is why hydroponic farming isn't the same as soil-based farming. So, really look at how this relates to the way we live naturally and the way we grow our food.
I'm not sure if you are able to answer this, but on the Canadian labels, it states a contraindication for those who are immunocompromised. Are you able to speak to that caution,
Yes,
label caution?
Right. So just be sure that you understand the difference between immunocompromised and autoimmune. Okay. So autoimmune means your immune system is hyperactive and it's attacking parts of you that it shouldn't be attacking. And immunocompromised means your immune system is not mounting a sufficient enough immune response to defend you from illness and even your own gut bad pathogens getting into your bloodstream and affecting you. Okay. Immunocompromised, whether it is congenital, like you're born with it, whether it is as a result of medication or treatment of some kind, can mean that even organisms that are good for you might be getting into places they're not supposed to, like your bloodstream, and causing a bad effect. And so I would definitely check with my practitioner, my physician, before starting a probiotic. By and large, probiotics are one of the safest things that you can do, even if you're on other medications, but it's good to have that relationship with the physician. Also, if you, for some reason, can't do a supplemental probiotic, nothing is stopping you from doing fermented foods. It's real food. And so again, you start slow, start low, go slow, check in, make sure everything's okay. If you have a health condition like immunocompromise, which is very serious, the most extreme example of immunocompromise is somebody who must live out their life in a plastic bubble with HEPA filters and can't be touched by anybody. And that's awful. So that is an extreme situation, but you should certainly be in communication with your physician if that is you.
Interesting question. Does taking a digestive enzyme make probiotics more viable?
It's a good question. I'm doing some critical thinking here. So yes, let's say that you don't digest. Let's say that you have been on a really bad diet and you have an epiphany and you start eating lots of fresh veggies and fruits. You start having, raw vegetable trays with hummus dip, and you start having salads and, sauteed vegetables, and you are having profound gas. That is a good sign that you're not digesting your food well, which also means that your microbiome won't access it as well. So if you are not a good plant digester, having an enzyme that helps break that down into smaller components means your microbiome will access more of it and your probiotics will thrive better as well. So I could say yes, absolutely. Again, anything we don't digest becomes toxic to us, and any food that we make more easily available to our microbiome and our probiotics that are directing a new microbiome means that they will multiply faster and take hold faster and provide more benefits more quickly.
Is there a difference between shelf-stable probiotics and refrigerator probiotics?
So in our doctor formulated line, the products themselves are no different. The bottle they are in is different. Those that are on the shelf are in a plastic bottle lined with a desiccant and a moisture barrier, keeping the product completely dry below 7% humidity. Therefore, it will not, in a warm environment, come alive, activate, start looking for food, eat it all up, and turn on each other, right? So I always say that probiotics are like gremlins. Don't get them wet. That's the most important thing. No direct light and don't get them wet, right? Those that are in the cooler are in glass. They have a little desiccant sachet inside, which helps, but being in a cold, dry refrigerator is really what keeps that product stable to the expiration date. So it's about convenience. We eat a little bit on the price of the shelf-stable bottles compared to the glass. It also depends on you and how you recycle and upcycle and reuse things as to what might be your choice.
Again, a couple of questions in one. Is there a probiotic profile that is more suitable for those dealing with constipation or for those dealing with bloat in general?
So that is usually coming from the large intestine, the colon. Bifidobacteria species are more likely to colonize in the large intestine, the colon. So the once daily ultra is actually richer in bifidobacteria. See if I can come back here. So I would say that in this lineup, that's probably a good one to focus on, because where all the other products are higher in lactobacillus strains, this is much higher in the bifidobacteria strains. It's like 60 billion of the CFU is bifido, 30 billion is lacto. So you're going to have greater bifidobacterial bulk, which can translate to moving things along, which will contribute to less blockage, less constipation, less gas and bloating.
So although we don't have anything specifically labeled to address chronic lower bowel issues, would the same be said that bifidobacteria is more supportive than the acidophilus probiotics?
Yes, however, strangely, this particular strain of Lactobacillus acidophilus has been shown, because it seems to make metabolites that nourish the lower bowel and the bifidobacteria. So there were studies on supplementing this acidophilus when people have lower bowel discomfort. So they're experiencing lower bowel discomfort, you're supplementing something that colonizes in the upper bowel, and yet it improves the lower bowel discomfort. So this particular strain is actually researched for that particular situation, and it is present in this particular product. So again, I like this particular product for that situation.
Would the same be said for those individuals who deal with issues where they alternate between issues of loose
Fast and
bowels
slow.
and then
Mhm.
constipation?
Yeah, you want to get normalization. It's almost always a bifidobacterium that help to support that signaling.
Um, I'm not sure if you are able to address this or not, but when dealing with urinary tract issues and a product like our urinary plus probiotic, is something like D-mannose something that could be included?
It can be included, but D-mannose also is specific to E. coli. So in some ways, it's a little bit redundant. Truly, 500 milligrams of Pacran compared to 250 and compared to 1,000, 500 milligrams gave, that level of anti-adhesion activity, the red bar here, for more than 24 hours consistently. And so do you need D-mannose? I don't know that it will make a more rapid recovery than without it. It's not harmful to try. There's not a problem in putting those two together. I think the question is more if you are having a urinary tract infection from an organism other than E. coli. So about 80% on average are E. coli infections, but there can be other causative organisms like Klebsiella and Pseudomonas. And in that case, there may be other herbals that are supportive better than cranberry. E. coli is just one of the most common ones.
Thank you. Someone is asking what type of impact taking a probiotic has on H. pylori bacteria.
So it's about creating balance. So H. pylori in a already stressed microbiome from mental stress, where the lining of the stomach has been damaged, H. pylori then can cause further damage. There are organisms in our gut that break down mucus and those that create mucus, promote the production of mucus. And so it's a balance. And when that balance is disrupted, we get this H. pylori infection. It's actually always there, but it takes over. And so we don't have anything particular that is for H. pylori, but the use of probiotics that can be taken by mouth and have effect all the way through the gastrointestinal tract, from the mouth all the way to the rectum, is very beneficial, because we never know where it's going to serve a purpose. And so this is, I saw somebody was asking about enteric coated products as well. This is another reason we don't enteric coat. We don't enteric coat because our organisms don't need it. They showed that in studies. We also don't enteric coat because we want these organisms to be the way you eat them, which is that they have the chance to take hold all the way through the gastrointestinal tract, which means they can help to balance out things like this. But I will say there's some great studies on Bacillus subtilis and other soil-based organisms for H. pylori. And so I would look into ones that are much more specific for that. Strangely, people who have no H. pylori have more asthma. So that tells you that there's a balance that is meant to be attained, right?
Just one more question here. I'm not sure if this came up during the probiotics or the time when you moved to the digestive enzyme, but individual is asking if either would be supportive in dealing with gout.
So gout is due to an overproduction of uric acid. An overproduction of uric acid is due to two things being consumed, excessive purines and excessive fructose. And purines you kind of can't get around because they're a part of DNA, and anything that has DNA is going to have purines. So if you eat things with DNA, you're going to get purines, period. Doctors tend to say, don't eat beans, don't eat red meat, don't drink beer, don't eat chard, and you know, it's not like anybody got gout from eating chard and beans, right? They got it from eating high sugar foods, high sugar drinks, and then a diet that didn't have a lot of cleansing foods in it, and maybe inactivity or intermittent activity. So I can't say that there's exactly a probiotic for that, but people who consume fermented foods, especially fermented vegetable foods, probably will have less likelihood of developing gout in general. Maybe you like meat, but you put sauerkraut on it or kimchi. That tends to make a whole world of difference. But there isn't a probiotic in our lineup that is specific for gout or for reducing the uric acid that causes the gout. We have other products in the US for that, but not in our Garden of Life products yet.
And just one more question here. Would the Organic Digest Plus help with something like acid reflux and or motility issues?
Okay, so acid reflux for digestive enzymes, usually people want to try something that has betaine HCl and pepsin in it for acid reflux. Ours does not. However, anecdotally, so many people have written in testimonials that talk about how much it helps with upper GI discomfort. So if you are prone to heartburn, if you're prone to reflux, if you're prone to, even when you're not eating something, having that symptom, a lot of people use Digest Plus even when they're not eating to help allay that symptom. Because if you get the stomach to close off that sphincter, the esophagus, you don't have as much splash up. And that is a huge part of how digestive enzymes help. So a lot of people have reported that it helps with symptoms of upper GI distress. Yes, it's not a part of why we made it. Motility, yes, because your food will be pre-digested better, and then you may be less prone to constipation. So it can be definitely a part of helping someone who has tendency toward constipation. If you tend to be loose, that means that you will not have as much time to absorb your nutrients. And then a digestive enzyme is very important because you need to break it down faster to get more out of it before you swish it out of your body. If you tend to be loose, you really need a digestive enzyme to get enough nutrients on a regular basis.
An individual just joined us a little bit late and does have a question. They've recently started taking not a probiotic from the doctor formulated line, but they're getting a lot of bloating in general. Would this be possibly the gut train changing? Could it be whether or not they're taking them with or without food?
I wouldn't say the with or without food. I would say not knowing that product and what's in it. It could be that you're not used to the prebiotics that are in that product. It could be that the terrain is changing. It depends on how long. We talked a little bit about this, but in general, there can be symptoms as you introduce new organisms. There can be die-off. There can be dumping of toxins by bad bacteria and bad fungi into your system. All of this can cause more distress. You might feel a little worse before you get better. So back it off. Use a half a capsule, skip a day, drink plenty of water. Look at how much prebiotic is in there. You may want to, take it a little bit more slowly if you're not used to prebiotics. But most capsules aren't going to have more than a few 100 milligrams of prebiotic fiber or resistant starch. So it's not excessive. It's not like taking a fiber supplement. And then make sure that there's nothing else in there that isn't needed for the product that might be causing that kind of a problem.
Thank you so much, Amber. And thank you so much to all of you for sharing part of your evening with us tonight to learn about the doctor formulated probiotics and enzymes, as well as just some amazing overall basics regarding the microbiome and probiotics in general. If your question did not get fully answered, or if something comes up at a later time, please do not hesitate to reach out to me at webinar@gardenoflifecanada.com. Again, that is webinar@gardenoflifecanada.com. For those of you who have asked about recording, this will be posted through the Healthy Planet website. They do have a education link somewhere on their retail site, so you can enjoy the presentation again if there's anything you would like to review. Again, thank you so much, Amber. Thank you to all of you. I hope all of you have a great rest of your evening. Take care.